So I love my Browning Buck Mark Camper. Great gun, fun to shoot, easy to shoot, cheap to shoot. But the one thing that I don't like about it is that the black sights on this gun are not so good when you're shooting against something black, like a black steel silhouette. It's very difficult to see the black on black on black. And so I actually painted them white a little bit. Crappy job, not too happy with it. And I saw the Williams fire sights on sale and thought I'd go ahead and get a set of those and install them. A little tricky to install them, so thought I'd make a video. The ones that I saw on YouTube were not so easy to follow, so thought I could do better. We'll see. Anyway, the tricky part about it is that you have to remove the rear sight and actually reuse the spring and detent and a roll pin in there. So I'll show you how to do that. Here we go. So first thing you want to do, so I'll just show you what I got here. A little bit of blue Loctite, that's all I had. Probably purple Loctite would be better. It's easier to remove later. Here's my fire sights, which you can see. Pretty nice. And I've got a couple little blocks of plastic, or you could use wood or something, just to lift the gun up a little bit as you knock the roll pin out of the rear sight. And I've got a 3/32 inch roll pin punch here and a 1/16 inch roll pin punch. This one's kind of optional. And I've got a small paper clip, not a big one. A little pin maybe I might need to pry out the spring, the detent spring. Small jeweler's screwdriver. And may need this needle nose, may not. Hammer to knock out the detent spring, and this is a T10 Torx bit on the end of this. And I've got optionally pliers here with a little black tape wrapped around the end to push the detent spring back in, or to push the detent back in. And what I bought was this Williams fire sights. For this model of Buck Mark, it's you get the model number 70231, and I believe for some other Buckmarks, the older ones or different models, you need 70232. The way it was described to me is that the models that have rear sights that are shorter than an inch get the 70232. This one's got a rear sight that's about 1 3/8 inch long. And apparently this one takes the 70231 Williams fire sights. So I'm going to set that aside. By the way, I mean, there may be other tools you could use, but I bought a set of roll pin punches at Harbor Freight for like $9. Used them to build my AR. Nice to have in the tool shed. So I'm going to set those aside. Just wanted to show you that. Pretty cheap. And let's get going here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to knock out this roll pin from the rear sight. So I'm just going to set these are a little piece of plastic here, just because there's not enough clearance to get this roll pin out if I were to just set this flat against a surface. I've also got this on top of a towel just to help keep from marring up my my beautiful little baby Buck Mark. So I'm going to take a roll pin, this 3/32 inch roll pin punch here, and gently tap out the roll pin with the hammer. It's out now, and that's not really under spring pressure, so you can just go ahead and remove that. And you can see the roll pin is here. So I'm just going to set that roll pin aside for a second. I'll go ahead and move these blocks off to the side too, give me a little more room to work. And then next thing you're going to do is put this gun up sort of upright, and I'm going to take this screwdriver and remove the rear elevation screw, and you can hear every click of that. That's because the detent's pushing against this screw, the spring-loaded detent. So I'm just going to unscrew this, and then I'm going to lift this up vertically and set that down for a second. You can see right here there's a leaf spring right here, and that does just come right out. So you have to be careful not to lose that. It doesn't come flying out when you unscrew that or anything, but Don't lose that. Note the orientation. There's this on either end, these leaves go up, and on the middle the leaf goes down. So that's the way, if you lose orientation on this, you'll have to make sure you get that back in that order. Also, well, let's just move on. So I'm just going to set the pistol aside for a bit, because what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to work on the rear sight. We're kind of have to do a little surgery on it to take some of the old parts out of the old rear sight and move it into the new Williams fire sight. Unfortunately, Williams doesn't just make them pre-built, which would be really sweet and make it a lot easier, but I guess they're saving a few pennies, and oh well, some manufacturing required. So I'm going to take out the rear elevation screw, set that aside, and if I flip this over, you'll see that there's a detent spring here, and then this rectangular piece of metal right here looks rectangular from this end. Can you see that okay? That's the detent, and you can see the little pointy detent nub right here that goes against the detent screw, I'm sorry, the elevation screw, and gives you those click 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 sounds as you do adjust your elevation and locks it in. And right across here there's a roll pin that holds that detent down and keeps this whole thing from flying apart. If I go over to the side here, you can maybe see that roll pin right there. Too small for any roll pin punch that I have, but I found that a paper clip works fine. Now we're gonna have to take out the spring, the detent, and that roll pin, and we're gonna have to put them back into the Williams fire sights. Probably not a bad idea to do all of this, say, inside of a plastic bag, but so you don't lose the spring or the detent or anything. But I'm going to go ahead and not do that so that you can see, because it's really hard to see inside the plastic bag if I'm filming. But what I'm going to do to prevent having losing any of this stuff, I hope, is I'm going to put my thumb over this to keep this from flying out as I push this roll pin out. So I'm going to use a small paper clip, and I'm just going to push this roll pin out. I said I'm going to push this roll pin out. I hope it's not listening to me. I said, oh, maybe because it's under pressure, I don't know. Let's try. Let's set this down and try pushing a little harder. I keep my finger over top of that spring though. Okay, not having fun with that. I'm going to take a little pin here, this little push pin thing, and try and push it out, because that'll stick inside. There we go. At least get it started that way with a little pin. And then I'm going to go ahead and push this down with a paper clip, get this roll pin out. Keep my finger over top of this stuff so I don't lose it, and then just remove this roll pin. You might want to use like a little needle nose to try and pull that roll pin out the last bit of the way, but that's a really tiny little roll pin. I'm going to set that aside now. I've still got my thumb over top of this. I don't want it to go flying. I don't really think it's going to go flying too much. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over, and there goes the spring right here. And the detent is still inside of here, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull this out just so you can see the orientation of it. I don't really need to even remove this. Actually, I do need to remove it. What am I saying? Because I got to use this in the other thing. But, okay. So here's the old rear sight, and that's all we're going to do with that. I'm going to just set this aside. Keep that in my save it for later drawer. Alright, so here's the new Williams fire sight, the rear sight. So if I flip this over, I'm going to have to get the spring and the detent back in. So let me just show you the detent orientation. The spring's going to go in here first of all, like this, but there's nothing really holding that spring in. There's no indentation under here to hold that spring in, so that's why you have to be careful and make sure to hold that down. But you just drop the spring back in. I don't think there's any top or bottom to that spring, so either way it's fine. But if you look at this this detent, I'm actually just going to go ahead and flip it around so that it matches. If you look at this detent, you can see that there's the square part of it, the rectangular part of it's going to push against the spring, and then there's sort of a little almost curved sort of hook type thing. That's where the detent, the roll pin's going to go through there. And then at this side, this sort of pointy, which you can't really see at this angle, but can you see it? Yeah, that's a little point on the end of that, and that's going to go into the rear elevation spring. So we have to make sure we get that orientation right. So I'm going to take this now, and with the spring in place, again, I'm going to just go ahead and put my thumb over here so I don't lose anything, and make sure that I get this back in with that same orientation. All right, so little points up here. Okay, I'll keep my thumb over that so I don't lose anything, I hope. Of course, just cursed myself. I'll do it on video and it'll go flying across the room, and that'll be the end of the video, but you'll never see that because then I won't publish it. All right, so anyway, now I've got to get this tiny itty bitty roll pin across here into that hole again, and it's kind of tricky to do because this slot actually has to, the slot in this detent has to go down, right? Has to go down until it reaches this point where the roll pin goes through. So I found the easy way to do that is keep your thumb over top of this. I've got a little 1/16 inch roll pin punch, and because it tapers out, I can slide it in this hole here. I got my thumb on top of this, right, to keep it from going, and I can basically depress that detent or detent spring, and depress the detent and the spring until I get it to the point where I can actually slip this back into the hole here and have it go across there, and it just slides right through. If you don't push this detent and detent spring down, you won't get that roll pin back through there because it won't slide through the hole. Now you might be wondering, like, wow, why don't I have to worry about that detent sliding back and forth as I'm shooting the gun? That went in way too easy, didn't it? But actually, when you put this back in the gun, you'll see that this rail here blocks, there's a rail on either side, it actually blocks the detent from flying out, so no problem with that. It didn't need to be tight. So now that I've got that back together, I'm going to go ahead and put this back into the pistol. So remember I said that you have to be careful of the orientation on this leaf spring right here. There is a sunken down area right here, and you need to keep that clear. So this can't be too far forward, or you won't be able to get this part, this protruding part down here, to sit down in there. And it can't be too far back, or it'll cover up the screw hole that you're going to need to for the elevation screw. So it's got to be just move forward, and remember the springs that go up, the leaf springs that push up, they're on the outside edges. And we're just going to push this forward until it's just past the hole here, which is almost even with this little sunken in area. And then I'm going to carefully take this rear sight and drop it back down on here, and I'm going to hold this down with my thumb, and I'm going to take this rear elevation screw, and I'm going to screw it in just a bit, just enough to get it started and held down. Of course, we're going to have to adjust the elevation later anyway, but just enough I said just enough. Okay, it's not cooperating. Did I screw up? Yep, I did. So right there you can see that that leaf spring was blocking the way. So that's a little bit tricky. Try again. Drop this on here. Put this elevation screw in. Okay, that's on just a bit to hold that tight, and now that gives me the ability to go ahead and put my roll pin back through here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started a bit. I'm just going to set this down. I'm going to knock that in with a hammer a bit. I said I'm going to knock that in with a hammer just a bit. I don't like banging too hard on my stuff. I'm always worried I'm going to slip and like maybe if I just put my block back up here. Knock that in a bit. But if you don't like banging on it like I don't, you can take a pliers and put a little black tape around it and just push this like this and push it through, and that way I don't have to worry about sliding. And come on, baby. Did this before, no problem. Why am I having trouble? There we go. Okay, so we get that in, and that's the rear sight. So looking good. And we're going to go. Now I'm going to take a T10 Torx for the front sight. Remove that. Take that screw out all the way. Okay, there's my old sight. I'm going to take my new sight. I'm going to put just a tiny bit of blue Loctite on. Probably should use purple Loctite, but I don't have any purple Loctite. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of blue on here. I'm not sure you even need Loctite at all on this, but I'll go ahead and do that. Yeah, good enough. And of course there's a little pin here on the top of the barrel that's going to go into that little indentation. So put that on. Get my screw back in here. Hopefully get my screw back in here. Make it tight. Hopefully don't make it too tight. Don't want to strip that little bugger. And clean my stuff off. Clean that little Loctite off the finish. And there we go. There's my fire sights. How's that look? Get a little light on that. I don't know. Alright. I like it. And that's it. That's how you install the Williams fire sights. Hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck. Happy shooting.